Recorder's officially on. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and give it a whirl.
This is Joe Baines from joebaines.com, and you are listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, reminding you to live consciously.
Perfect. See? That's good. Yes. Live consciously. One of my recent favorites was Find Your Village. And I dig that. Yes, because we're all just... See, you're in a library, so it's perfect. Anyway, let me hit stop. Yeah. I'll be right back.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Elizabeth Pearson Garr, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
Oh, great. I'm so happy to be here, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for showing up. And you're on time. Very professional. Right on time. Perfectly on time. So you're at whatitslike2.net, and I struggle with that so far. That's why I said it so slow. Talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in this awesome podcast that I checked out. I really like it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love meeting interesting people and talking to them. And so that's kind of what this podcast is about. I interview people who have done really intriguing, unusual things that most of us will never get to do in our lives.
Right.
So I find these people who have done things like summit Mount Everest or win an Olympic medal, or this 16-year-old kid who sailed across the Atlantic Ocean solo and didn't even know when he was doing it that he was setting a world record.
Oh, wow.
By doing that.
Show.
And so
wow.
People who just have done these things either with real intention, like obviously going to the Olympics, or, they just have these dreams and passions, and then they work hard. And of course they hit obstacles. But they fight through them and they keep going. And so I kind of find these metaphors for life that all of us can use, even if we're not climbing a major mountain. You know, we're on day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. We're all kind of having highs and lows. And I've heard from people that it can be inspirational, even if they're not going to do those same kinds of activities.
Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. That's it. Your show and my show are very, kind of, I'm not going to say they're the same, but they rhyme. How's that sound?
Oh, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right. I like to focus on transition points, And
I think hearing people's stories really kind of shows the humanity of us all and what we have in common more than what we have differences among us.
I really like focusing on struggle points because that doesn't show up on social media posts. Nobody says like, I'm really struggling with my identity today. Geez, who am I? Nobody ever put on Facebook ever.
Yeah. Right. It's our sort of airbrushed life that gets posted these days.
The airbrushed life. Exactly. That's it.
As opposed to like our real humanness, with all the, as we say, warts and all. But, I think that's where we really see each other, is when we see like, oh, everyone struggles. Even that person at the top of the profession, or, on the podium or whatever, like they struggled so much. And they not just struggled like, oh, maybe had an injury, but they heard no, they were given rejections. And then the mental struggles, the little voices inside our heads that we all get, that we all have to fight with, like telling other people, telling us no, our own selves telling us no, you can't do it. And so I just really admire people who kind of find something they want to do and keep going for it. Or like you say, they might veer, like they stay true to themselves and say, actually, not this anymore. I'm going to do that. And so, I love hearing stories. I love telling stories. And so that's what I love doing about this podcast.
So you've done a lot of vrooming and veering.
I have indeed to get here. I didn't graduate from college and start a podcast. No.
Well, podcast didn't exist when you graduated from college.
They sure didn't.
So let's go back in time and talk a little bit about Elizabeth Pearson Garr growing up. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Palo Alto, California.
Wow. Okay.
My dad was a professor at Stanford, and my mom was a teacher, and then she became a high school principal. So very education kind of focused place that, but really fun. I mean, really fun, happy, loving upbringing. The one thing I always knew about myself is that I wanted to become a mom because I loved my childhood so much.
That's awesome.
But I loved it academically. I always loved writing. That was kind of my happy place.
Nice.
Like just creative writing, any type of writing. So I thought I wanted to do something with writing, or early on, I had this idea that I'd love to work in TV. I think I'd love to work somehow in television.
Interesting.
And the older I got, and I remember in college looking at an internship in television, and people were like, no, that's really hard. It's really hard to work in TV. You should,
right.
Don't
do that.
Writer,
it's hard. Right.
Yeah. And the odds of success are so low, stick with something else.
That sounds like a parent's advice.
It does. Fortunately, It was not my parents. My parents were really awesome. Like as much as so here was my dad, this, very academic guy. And when I graduated from college, because I liked writing, people said, well, you can't just say you want to be a writer. You need to say what kind of writer you want to be. And I also loved cooking. So I said, well, I'll be a food writer. And they said, well, you need some expertise.
You can't just write about food and not know anything about food.
Yeah, sort of with any
authority.
Just an interest, authority, that's the word.
Right.
So I should go to cooking school. And so I told my parents, while all my friends were kind of going off to management consulting jobs and graduate degrees and all this, well, I think I'm going to go to cooking school the fall after graduating from college. And my dad, to his great credit, said, wonderful. If that's what you want to do, show me that you have passion. You have shown me that you have passion about it. As long as you're not just copping out and saying, I don't know what else to do with my life. I'm just going to do this because it looks easy.
See, now I wish your dad had been around every day in my life.
I mean,
that's a very good voice to hear, right? Are you copping out?
But I really admired it because I know in his heart, he probably thought like, he has loved his career. So he probably thought, oh, maybe she should get a PhD. That's kind of a parent thing to do, right? If you like what you're doing and you see your kid, you think, oh, maybe they should follow in my footsteps. But he never did that. He really looked at me and my sister and thought, well, what do you love doing? And he knew I had this real creative spirit. And so they supported me to say, sure, go after what you want to go after. And so I've always taken a really non-traditional path that I know made them nervous at times because my mom would throw in things like, but that job doesn't have benefits. And I remember thinking, benefits? I'm like 23. Let me live my life.
That's true. But that job doesn't have benefits. True.
I get it now. As a mom, I can see if one of my kids is super, super artsy and she wants to be like an actress and a singer. And I could see myself thinking, that doesn't feel safe. On the other hand, I was kind of that kid too. I kept wanting to do the creative route. So I appreciated my parents, not pushing me to just do some job that I felt was boring. I admire the people that can go sit in an office for 8 or 10 or however many hours a day. That just was hard for me.
I get it. Okay, so let's just cross some T's and dot some I's. So you went to Harvard, right, for your undergrad, and then and that was in literature or history or history?
History and literature. It was a combined major. Well, they call it concentration. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you go to culinary school. Is that what it's called? Or cooking school? Culinary school.
Yeah. Culinary.
I can't. That's a hard word.
Let's just see either.
There you go.
And that really was just to get some education under my belt. I knew I didn't want to become like a chef or work in on a cruise ship or in a hotel kitchen or anything like that. I just wanted to know really how to make a proper French stock and, you know, that kind of thing. Really understand like the principles of French cooking and that sort of
mise
thing.
en place, shit together. That's
there you go. Look at you. Looks like you went to culinary school.
I just watch a lot of Food Network.
Oh, yes.
But I will say, like, the idea of that, am I saying it right? It's French. I don't speak French. So when they say mise en place, right? Is that how it's said?
Mise en place, I
mise
think.
En place. There you go. See, I learned something. Good for me.
I don't speak French either, but I do remember that from cooking school.
Right. And that, you know, whenever you watch a cooking show, everything's already prepped, right? The onions are cut and measured, right? And they're in a little thing, right? So you do that for every little ingredient. And then when it's time to cook, it makes everything easier, right? That's the concept.
Yes. And they also make it all look so easy on a cooking show because that's already done.
It's done.
And they say, you just throw in the celery and the carrots. And then you, well, yeah, that's why it takes you 5 minutes.
Exactly.
I have to sit and do my prep chopping for 20 minutes ahead of time.
So that's got to be like the low end job in the restaurant, doing prep. I would imagine.
Yeah, it must be. You know, I've never, so I never did work. I never worked in a restaurant. I don't know if you've watched the show The Bear, but I was watching with my husband and he was like, wow, did you ever do that? And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, that's hard work.
Yeah.
That is, you know, you got huge stock pots of things. Like, no, I never did any of that work.
Whenever I watch like the super intense restaurant kind of service kind of shows, you know, it's very militaristic. Like there's a guy in front yelling things out and everybody says, yes, it's like the Navy.
Yes, chef.
And you have to say that because they want to know that you heard them, you know, just like in the Navy. It's like, say it back. What did I say? Say it back. Don't make me tell you to say it back. Right. And that's a thing they do in the Navy.
It's like with one of my kids. I'll say, did you actually hear me? You know, or you just, can you please tell me like, or I just need a little reply that you actually heard that you're supposed to empty the dishwasher now.
Okay. So, all right. So you go to college, then you go to cooking school. So what happens next? Because that's a beginning and an end and an end and a beginning. Yeah.
So then I was a food writer and I still had this idea, like, I'd love to work in TV. That was kind of this dream that had been germinating for a while. And I happened to read that this new network, this cable network was starting, and it was called the Television Food Network.
Wow.
And I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and the TV Food Network was in New York. And I just found a name of a guy. And I found an address and I wrote him a letter, an old fashioned letter, because this was the 90s.
Yeah.
And I said who I was and my background and my resume. And I said, and I'm going to be in New York next week. Could I possibly meet with you about working at your network? And I had no plans to be in New York next week, but I was like, I know I can be in New York next week.
I like it.
So he wrote back and said, sure. And he gave me a job. And I ended up as one of the first employees of the Food Network, although we called it TVFN back then, TV Food Network. And so we only had 2 shows. I worked on it was called Food News and Views. It was like a TV or a food. That's what it was. It was like a little news show about
food. Okay.
And so, I was there right from the start and worked there for 2.5 years. And so that got my foot in the door into TV. It wasn't on camera. My dream had always been to be like an on-camera person, but I learned how to write and produce and, do all the background stuff. And it was super exciting. It was really fun. It was like a great time to feel like I was, like when I was working hard. And I never had a dream of living in New York. I wasn't one of those people who felt like, check this off my bucket list. But anytime I was having a bad day, I was like, I'm working towards my goals. Like, I'm right here in the center of things, and I'm working in TV
and
in New York.
In TV, and it's related to food. So you've nailed it.
I'm
you
doing
had a little list, right? And you were like, I want to write, I want to work in TV, and I want it to be about food. So I mean, you got all 3. I mean, what else could you want?
Well, the other part that I wanted
okay.
was I wanted to be on camera. I wanted to be on the Today Show. That was my goal. I wanted to be like Katie Couric. Like that was kind of that was my dream.
Okay.
And so at the Food Network, they were pretty clear about the lines. Like someone was hired for on camera and other people were hired for behind the camera. Occasionally they let us do like little stand-ups and little things like front of the camera things, but mostly that was just so we could work on our tapes to send off other places. But one day, I think just playing off of the boldness I had to get that job, I just decided to write a letter to Diane Sawyer. Because I really admired her. And I don't know why. Like, I was very courageous, I guess, in those days. And she actually called me back.
Wow.
On my answering machine, my old-fashioned answering machine. Well, actually, she didn't. Her assistant did. And I remember coming home from work one day, and I thought, this can't be real. But she said, I'm the assistant to Diane Sawyer, and she got your letter, and she'd love to meet with you.
Wow.
Because I just thought I'd love career advice from you. So I went into her office, and I was so nervous, and she was so lovely and kind to me, and basically said, like, I see some of myself, in you, like this young, hungry woman who wants to become, a reporter. And she basically said, you need to get out of New York. Like, if you want to do, you're not going to get
New
what
York
you
market
want.
is too big.
It's too big. You can, if you want to be a producer, stay here for the rest of your life. But if you want to be in front of the camera, you got to go to a small market.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
I did do a couple other twists and turns. I actually moved to LA from there because other stuff, but taking her advice, I ended up in Billings, Montana as an anchor and reporter.
All right.
So again, similar thing to at the Food Network. When I had hard days, I was sort of like, I'm really doing it. Like, I'm doing what Diane Sawyer told me to do, boots on the ground.
Right.
And I worked so hard. I mean, I just was trying to put my best foot forward all the time and just like sending out tapes to bigger markets and everything. So this was my total vroom, vroom.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a big Veer. I'm going to do what you do on your show. What was it like to be like a TV anchor in Billings, Montana? Because that sounds fun. It sounds like a lot of work, like a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot of hours. So I was the weekend anchor, and then I was a reporter for 3 days in the week. So my days off were 2 days on the weekdays.
Okay.
So I felt like I didn't really have any life because my weekends, there wasn't, in my mind, a lot going on in Montana. I didn't really have any friends except who was at the station.
Okay.
And they mostly had the weekends off. And if anything was coming into town, like a show or anything, it was on the weekend.
Fun. Yeah. Right.
And I was working on the weekends. And so my days off weren't with anyone that I knew from work. And so I felt pretty lonely. I felt quite lonely. And I felt very fish out of water, kind of. And so I was really there for work. I just kind of had a couple of good friends through work. And I increasingly got just frustrated because I understood that we had to do everything. It is not like people think from watching TV, where you see these bigger markets where they have teams of producers and editors and, anchors and everybody helping out for these amazing stories. I mean, in these small markets, you're doing a lot of one-man banding it. I mean, I was doing a lot of things like when I was an anchor, I was producing the whole show also. And it was, it's a lot of work. You're going out. I mean, we had a cameraman to do field work.
Okay.
But then the nice thing is that we had a lot of autonomy. I mean, we got to create really fun and interesting stories a lot of the time.
Okay. Right.
But after a while, I just got pretty demoralized at how much of the industry, it just became increasingly clear to me how much was just based on my appearance and not on the quality or content of the work that I was producing.
Interesting.
Because
just how you look. You look good on camera. You're getting us numbers. That's all I care about.
And my age and my ethnicity, like they would, I'd send out my tape to a bigger market and I would get back. I remember this one comment, we already have one of you. Oops. And I thought, I think there's only one of me, but okay, you basically have a late 20s Caucasian woman. But I can probably bring something else maybe. And then the real story that was just crazy. I remember one day the station brought in this, I don't know what she was called, some sort of talent scout or something. And she had all the anchors go read on the set. And I did. And she pulled me over and she said, sorry, honey, in this business, some people have it and others don't. And I'm afraid you just don't have it.
I've heard this before.
And I thought, well,
what's it?
That doesn't feel great, but all right. And then the next morning she came in for day 2 and she said, Elizabeth, come over here. She took me in the back and she brought all this makeup and she put all this stuff in my hair, put all this tons of makeup on. She goes, go back on the set and read again.
See if it
I think I did
up.
the exact same thing. And she had this big smile and she goes, now you have it.
Interesting.
And I said, so it is
makeup and hair?
The makeup and hair? That is interesting to me because I read the exact same copy and I pretty much read it the same way.
Right.
And there was just enough things like that where I thought, you know what, at the same time, then there's you have to factor in your personal life also. My sister had her first baby and I realized like, wow, I have zero personal life here. Haven't gone on a single date. My sister's moving on with her life. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, you're just all in on this job thing. Right.
And if someone were to say, which of course they can't ever say with anyone in any career or any part of your life, like, if you do this, it will lead to that and it will lead to that. And therefore just keep going. You'll make it. Right. I probably would have if they'd said you just do 2 years here and then you'll do 2 years in Omaha and 2 years in Dallas and then you'll end up on the Today Show. Oh, I certainly would have done it. Yeah. But there's no guarantee of anything.
No.
So I veered.
Okay. So after how long in Billings?
Well, less than 2 years because I had a contract for 2 years and it's the only time in my life I've ever broken a contract. But I was pretty miserable. And as soon as I realized,
you're lonely for sure.
Yeah. And when I realized like, I don't think I can hack that. I'm not going to do this career-wise anyway.
Right.
And so I asked to get let out of my contract. And the only reason they let me do it was because I told them I'm not going to a competitor. I'm getting out of the industry.
Okay.
So they let me out.
Okay.
And so anyway, that I moved back to LA and I started working. I kept working in media, just not in front of the camera.
Gotcha.
Stuff. So I kept.
So now you're writer producer.
Yeah. So I feel like that was an interesting journey because I don't regret that decision because you have to own your decisions, of course, that you've made. And I made it very thoughtfully. And I know that it was the right thing to do at the time. I still would love to have had my dream job. Like, it's not that I didn't want to have that, but I think you have to realize that nothing is done in a vacuum and that everything has a cost. If you're going to do one thing, if I was continue down that path, I was sacrificing a lot of personal life as well as a lot of professional integrity. Like I was doing stories that I didn't think were that important anymore. And, it just didn't turn out to quite be the job that I thought it was going to be. And so I just thought it was important to keep reevaluating what I thought was important.
Yeah. Some of my best decisions ever were like, you get to this point, like a decision point, a veer, right? And you go, I thought I wanted that. And now that I see what it is, I don't want it anymore. That's some of the best no ever, right? You can save yourself so much time, trouble, effort, pain, loneliness, sorrow from just going, okay. There was this vision I had and reality doesn't match the vision. I know I'm going to erase out that vision now and just go find the next thing. I like doing that.
And that all comes from
doing it.
and self-knowledge, right?
Yeah,
is really
totally.
about knowing. And that's one thing I tell my kids. I have 14 and 16-year-old kids. And so they're coming, to this age to be able to think about these things more. And sometimes I'll say something, you might feel like you've failed or you haven't gotten what you wanted. This is good to know. This is all learning about yourself. How do you feel when that happens? How do you react to disappointment? How do you pivot when something doesn't go your way? These are all things that help you learn about yourself.
Yeah.
And this is really important to know as you move forward in life, because the stuff is going to keep happening. You're going to have these the decisions get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And so you have to know you have to know yourself well enough to make the best decision for yourself at the time.
See, now you had like really good, I think, parents probably. They probably supported you again in that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, there's parents. This like, I felt like when I was 18, like getting close to graduating high school, there was this song on the radio all the time. Like 18 and life to go. It's like it's like you're driving over a cliff. That's what it feels like, It's like, now what do I do, Dad? And they've got like, my mom and dad are great, right? But like my dad worked in the same factory until he retired at 60 something. And my mom grew up on a farm and cleaned houses, right? Never really had a job, but briefly had a job, didn't like it. Bless her, but I think I wish somebody had been around to say things like this to me, like young people out there, just because you get a job doesn't mean it's for life, right? That's what the message, right? You can go try things. And if it doesn't work out, just leave. That's okay. I've done it so many times and I'm like 55. Keep doing that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that I feel like that there's no such thing really as failure. I think that word, because it's all,
you
learning.
It's a bad word. I think people just like think, well, if I fail, it's like there's this mark on my permanent record that God's keeping in this book. And then at some point, Jeff will just get X'd out and he go, no, he's done. He's still alive, but he's done.
Yeah.
He is forever a failure and can never do anything good ever again. That doesn't happen. It's just an event. And then you go through it. Maybe you're sad, maybe not. Right. And then you go find the next thing. It's not, I think if more kids were trained that way, like this is just what life's like. That would save a lot of hardship. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
and
on my
expect
soapbox.
it.
Yes.
Actually expect it. Like,
yes.
Don't expect that you're either continually just going on this up or that it's going to be this wonderful plateau of easiness. Like expect the ripples because that's the reality.
Yes.
Like nobody has it easy the whole way.
One of my favorite things was this. I think there's this fallacy that we all fall under of at some point my life will be easy. And I'll just relax and glide and then die and everybody will love me and throw, flowers on my funeral bed or whatever, right? That's not true. Life, just the struggles change. They don't go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So let's move on. So now you go back to LA. So what happens next?
So I kind of try to figure out, well, first of all, I was really happy to just be back in California because, like I mentioned, I was feeling like I wanted a personal life again. And so, and I had lived in LA before and I found, even though I'm from Northern California and there's kind of a Northern California versus Southern California, like bias thing. I love LA and I just found it a really open place of, and there's a lot of creativity. And
LA's
people
great.
are just so welcoming, sort of like, oh, my cousin's boyfriend's sister's neighbor's having a barbecue. Do you want to come next weekend? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like it's just really nice.
The social opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
You just fall into these things, I get it.
So that really helped. And so I ended up working in a couple of different environments. But speaking of failure, or something that I thought was a major failure, I got a job that for a while I thought man, first I thought this could be the greatest thing ever. And then I thought, this is the biggest failure of my life. And now I tell my kids about it because I want them to show that you can totally flail. Maybe, oh, that's good. Flail, not fail. Just add an L. But learn from it.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a job as the West Coast, I don't know if I was maybe called the assistant or somehow the presence for the highest up woman at the Fox at News Corp. She was located in New York and she wanted kind of like an LA presence, like eyes and ears. Okay. So I basically had her office on this executive floor on the Fox lot in LA. Like Peter Chernin, the head at the time, was like down the office. And I literally had a butler. Like he would come in and ask what I needed. It was the craziest. I was in my late 20s and I was treated like royalty. And I would go into these meetings, but I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing. And she was so far away and I was given very little direction. Right. And so like I say, I completely flailed. And after a short bit of time, it was clear, like I was not cut out. This was not working. And so
did you decide that or someone else decide that?
We decided it together. She and I both it was like, this is
not working. Right. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Right.
I don't know what I'm doing. She didn't have time or energy, or she didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing. I think she just sort of wanted me to take some ball and run with it, but there was no ball. There was just, she wanted me to create something but that's not really who I was. And
it's not your thing.
So it ended, but I felt terrible about myself. I just felt like, wait a minute,
I had a butler. I won.
I had my own fridge in this ginormous office. I was with all these bigwigs and they were creating The Simpsons down the lot. Like, why didn't I take advantage of this incredible opportunity? Yeah. But instead I looked and I thought, you know what? There's tons I could have done differently. Also, give myself a little grace. I had no guidance. Right. Like there was no one there helping me. There was no playbook. There was no one checking in on me. I was basically getting paid to
sit in an office and ask for coffee.
And
I really need some coffee.
It was kind of just a really odd situation. Whereas I think if I had been more of a go-getter at a different time in my life, I would have probably said, hey, actually, this doesn't fit, but I would love to learn this aspect of your business. Can I go work in that division or something like that? Like, I wish I had done that. But overall, I look at it now with more maturity and say, it was just a bad fit and it's not my fault that it didn't work out. And some things just weren't meant to be. And let's move on. Yeah. But I really beat myself up for a while about that. Like, how could I have
screwed that up?
Such a failure. Yeah.
Been there, done that. So I think we all go through that. I think some part of me would have been like George Costanza. Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Of course.
Where he just sits in the office and maybe takes a nap. I could totally see myself doing that. I would have bled that job dry and made a lot of money. Oh, they don't really care what I do all day. Wow. Yeah. At least you were honest and you're like, am I supposed to be doing something in here? What did you actually we don't have to spend much more time on it, but what did you do on those days where you had nothing to do? Did you just try to talk to people or?
There was no one really around because I was on this executive floor.
You're on the C-suite. There's no one around. Okay.
I remember looking, I guess was this sort of when the internet was starting? This was what was this? Like late 90s or something? I remember I was supposed to be researching. They wanted to start some new cable channels. So I was supposed to be coming up with ideas for cable channels or something. So I was doing a lot of researching.
Okay.
So I do remember.
Well, that you can do that on yourself by yourself.
I guess that's what I was doing. I felt really ineffective. So I like to be challenged, but obviously I think we all need to be given a little bit of, guidance. Like I like to sort of feel like I have some bit of expertise, of course, knowing what you're doing. So So I eventually moved back to the Bay Area where I'm from, and I started well, initially, it's kind of when the whole .com boom was starting. So everyone's like, oh, you got to work in tech. You got to work in tech. And so I did that for a little bit. And then I was like, oh, this is not for me. And so then I started working for PBS, for some shows for PBS out of San Francisco.
Okay.
And then I eventually went to graduate school. I went to get a master's in documentary filmmaking.
Wow.
Which was really fun and really challenging, like the hardest school I've ever done.
You have to get really super technical about all the cameras and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's hard.
A lot of technical stuff. But again, a lot of amazing storytelling techniques and super just really engaging. I just loved it. But it was hard work. We made 3 films our first year and then 1 thesis film our second year. Wow. So it's very hands-on. So that was really a fun thing to do. So all that is kind of why I eventually, years later here, started the podcast, because I thought, I can't really work in film. I live in the Bay Area again, and I'm not really going to move to LA or New York and work in TV or film right now because I have kids. But I thought, well, a podcast can kind of use a lot of the skills that I've learned. Obviously not the visual stuff, but it can use researching and interviewing and editing and storytelling and all of that. But podcasting, as you know, it's its own beast also. Like there's a lot that I didn't know. Like podcasting has been its own challenge for me.
Oh, so I've done 3 different shows. Mm-hmm. So like my first podcast was just sort of like, I guess you'd call it like an experiment. Like, can I learn all the steps on my own, only using the internet to get something like a web page, a domain, and then on iTunes, right? And that was it. If I met those 3 things, I was like, woohoo, right? And I did it. And then it was like a kind of a buddy interviewee show, kind of like a hybrid. So it's like when I didn't have a guest, a friend and I would just chat. Right. And I think we did like 59-ish shows. Oh, wow. And then we quit. I quit. I was like, I think I was at that time I was spending money doing GI Bill school at the same time. And I transitioned to like where I was only doing like 1 class a week. And so then I could do homework, do the podcast. It was easy, right? And then I went to massage school. And massage school is like every day from morning until like 2:30, 3 o'clock or something like that, So it's like, okay, where do I podcast now? And I was in LA, so I was driving way too much. So
isn't it physically tiring too, massage school?
Oh my goodness.
My friend's husband did it.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that was probably why I chose not to be a massage therapist after a massage school. Yes. It's basically you're an athlete.
Yeah.
You have to treat your life as if you were an athlete. It is, my back would just, if I would massage too long, they try to teach you how to do it right. So you're not hurting your body. That did not get transmitted to my brain correctly. So whenever I did I did it wrong.
You're helping other people's bodies and you're hurting your own body.
Yeah. There's this whole concept of body mechanics and how to like do it in a way that you're, using the force from your legs.
Wow.
And you're not supposed to use your hands or your thumbs. Like they're just at the end of the power, right? That's correct body mechanics. And if you do it right, then you're not, hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Very few people do it right. So they get done and they, jump in an ice bath. That would be what I was thinking about doing. I remember doing like this volunteer beach massage once. And I don't know what I did, but, have you ever like thrown your back out where you can't move?
Not that bad, but my husband has.
Yeah. It seems like it's more of a guy thing, but it's like, whatever, my back it still happens less often, but I just seized up. I had to lay on the floor in the studio and just moan for like 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And then go, okay, I think I can move again. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
Awful.
See, so I should be on your show. So let's talk about like your podcast. So you have all kinds of really fun people on your show. I just listened to, I can't remember his name, but he was the NYPD retired sergeant or detective.
Vic Ferrari. Yeah.
He was amazing. Yeah, it was great. I listened all the way to the end. He was really fun.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to get these people kind of from all walks of life.
I love it.
So people can, some of them are more serious. I interviewed a guy that had been wrongly convicted of murder, and he was in prison for 19 years. And before he got out, because finally the real murderer confessed. There was no DNA. So finally the real murderer confessed. And then now he's this incredible, he runs a nonprofit. I mean, the compassion this guy has after how he's been treated in life. And that one, I really love that episode because I had to work really hard to get him. I was reading an article in our local newspaper, and it was really about his nonprofit. And it just happened to mention that his name, and then said that he was in prison for 19 years, wrongly convicted. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to interview him. And it took me so long to get him. So I was like, oh yeah, that's my old journalistic chops, like to have to get him.
Chase it down.
And he's so lovely. He's just such an amazing person.
Right.
So some of them are more serious like that, but he's not a serious person. I mean, he's really funny also.
Right.
And then
it's a serious topic. I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
So the topics really, they really range in things. I, interviewed someone who's a Hollywood actress, and I interviewed someone who's a sound healer. And, so it's kind of, there's a whole variety. There's kind of something for everyone, I hope.
But that's perfect, because you're not going to get bored anytime soon.
Me, the interviewer?
Right.
Or the listener?
Either or, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like podcast potpourri.
Yeah. Some people say like, oh, to grow this podcast, you need a real niche, like it should
don't
be about
do that. Don't do
Swiss
niches.
chocolate or something like that.
Don't do
I'm
niches.
Well, I don't know. That feels
I think, niches are fine if you're a niche-y person. If you're like really, you want to know like million miles deep about, I don't know, fungal spores or something,
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what I've been wondering about.
And you've got a bunch of people that are really into that, then, go for it. I'm just not that kind of person. When I hear niche, I'm like, ew, it just seems like, well, geez, that'd get boring after show number 2 for me. So I think we're on about the same page on that.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I guess there's just different types of people. Like I remember, I actually, I admire you starting the podcast by just looking online for everything. I took a continuing studies course during the pandemic to try to get things going. And I remember they used the specific example, which stuck with me since I have a food background. They said, like, don't just do a podcast on food, do a podcast on mangoes. And I asked in this little session, I was like, okay, so let's just say I do my podcast on mangoes, and after 8 episodes, 12 episodes, I've got no more to say on mangoes. I've done the history. I've done how to cook them. I've done everything on mangoes, and I've created, I've got my whole mango passionate audience. Now what? Now I want to do a podcast on, even if it's a different, now I don't want to do fruit anymore. And so and they're like, now what do I do? Yeah. And so they were like, oh, well, by that time you've probably cultivated enough rapport with your audience that they'd follow you anywhere. So now if you want to do a podcast on, I don't know, home decor or whatever, they'd follow you. And I'm thinking, I don't know.
No.
Is that really true?
No.
Like, I think these are mango devotees.
Yes, they don't really care who you are.
Yeah.
They want to know about mangoes.
They really do care about the host for sure. But it was interesting because I guess there's just, one of the things with podcasting is that there's no template. There's no just sure road to success that if there were, everyone would just follow it. And
but that's life.
Fine. But that's not it. Like you just sort of have to find your own road.
Yeah. I think I'm reading a Seth Godin. There we go. The other Seth. There's too many Seths. Seth Godin wrote this book, and I want to say it's called The Practice.
Okay.
And I think it's his most recent book. So he's sort of redefining what art could be. Right? Yeah. So it's basically something creative that is not guaranteed to work. That's art.
What a great definition.
I know. Yeah, because there's no guarantee, right?
Wow.
And you do it anyway, right? So, that's kind of what this shows. My Vroom Vroom Veer, I didn't think that, right? It was just like, I started thinking maybe I'll be a writer blogger. And I wrote and blogged for a very long time, but I just don't really enjoy writing so much. It's very, very much a solo kind of thing. I know you write, so you can write, right? And it's not like I hate writing. It's just not like, doesn't light me up, right? Yeah. It's not like I'm going to like go, oh, I really have to write now because it's my thing. No. But if you ask me to podcast, I could podcast like as long as it's interview based. I don't think I could do like that Dan Carlin thing that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like just get a bunch of notes and just talk for 5 hours. Couldn't do that.
Well, I will say that I think this talking with people, interviewing people or being interviewed is like the highlight of podcasting for me because it is can be very solitary. And particularly, I work from home. I don't go to like an office or something where I have office mates. Right. And I'm not a huge extrovert, but I'm not an introvert either. I'm kind of right in the middle. Yeah. And so it can be kind of lonely.
It's totally lonely.
When I get to interact with people, and everyone is so interesting in their own way, even if it's not everyone would be my best friend going forward. But I love talking with every single person that I've gotten to interact with. Right. And so it's really totally the highlight for me is to get to interact with these people. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to just be a writer where I'm solitary all the time. Right. This part is great.
The best thing for podcasters like you and me to market the show is do other people's shows.
Yes, for sure.
So I want to do your show and you can come back and do my show again.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really
I knew that going in. I just haven't done it. I haven't done it enough. I've been on a handful of other podcasts, but for whatever reason, when I think about it, I'm going, yeah, that's great. But I think what turns me off usually is it's hard for me to find shows where I can be like, because I'm retired and I don't need money anymore. So like, it's totally just what Seth said. It's like, this is my art and it might not work, but it's what I'm doing now. So I don't go crazy. And that doesn't really resonate with people on podcasts so much. It's like they want to know what you're selling and what you're, how are you making money? Your angle. Yeah. Exactly. So I have to find it takes a little bit longer to find the people that are interested in just talking and this kind of, expression, I guess is.
You might want to listen. I interviewed this woman. She's a contemporary artist. She's had shows at MoMA in New York and things. And she's so great. She was actually, I went to high school with her.
Oh, wow. And that's awesome. Talk about a good conversation.
She's so smart and like just lovely how she explains stuff. But she's an artist at her core. And just how same thing. She just needs to create in her life. And so much of what she creates ends up literally on the floor because it's not worth, displaying. Right. But then other things just end up, for this national audience. Right. And
she could never tell you which one is going to be the thing.
No.
Because it's not up to her. That's how art works. It's like it has
to come out of her.
It comes out and then you put it aside and go, okay, that's done now. And if somebody looks at it and goes, wow, that's cool. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I found really inspirational because she just is like, this is who I am and I need to just keep creating.
This has been a blast. It's been so about an hour, so we should wrap up now. Oh, yeah. So you are at, let me make sure I get it right. Let's see here. whatitslike2.net. So talk a little bit about how people can best get in touch with you, find your podcast, and everything else.
Oh, thanks. So that's my website. And so you can find all of the episodes there of my podcast, the whole back catalog. You can also just find all the episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But on the website, you can all my social media links are there too. So you can contact me.
Perfect.
Through those.
Yeah, perfect. Elizabeth Pearson Garr, thank you for hanging out with me for about
Jeff.
an hour.
This is fun.
This has been a blast. If you ever want to pick my brain about podcasting, feel free. I've done it a little bit. So if there's, that's free.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.